If you're installing polytubing for your irrigation or drip irrigation project, you'll probably want stakes to hold down the tubing every 2 to 4 feet as you go so the tubing stays in place. Staking in place makes it much easier to complete the install, and without stakes, the tubing can experience significant movement when the system is turned on. This can cause the tubing to move away from the plants it is intended to irrigate, and can cause the tubing to pull other parts of the system out of their carefully arranged locations. This movement can also cause clogged emitters. That's why we think tubing stakes are well worth it. Tubing stakes also work great to anchor the very end of polytubing and drip tape rows, which shift due to heat expansion, contraction, and water surges when the system is turned on and off. We often get the question, can I just use some landscape staples I have lying around? Yes, you can use landscape staples, but the best stake depends on your soil type, project size, and tubing diameter. Standard landscape staples from a hardware store will work, but our irrigation-specific stakes are designed to hold tubing more securely and make installation easier. Take it from my experience that the wrong stake can make a setup that should be a breeze into a frustrating affair. I'll share some tips in the rest of this video that will come in handy for specific situations. If you have rocky soil in your area, make sure to stick around. Tubing stakes, often referred to as hold-downs, are available for all tubing sizes. Undersized stakes can pop loose, while oversized ones waste money, and some work better in certain soil types. No matter the stake, the upfront costs are minimal for a seamless installation that will reliably stand the test of time. Just make sure that if you choose wire stakes, they are galvanized. Non-galvanized stakes will rust and corrode. Here's an example of 2 stakes installed at the same time, one of them being galvanized and the other non-galvanized. There are J-wire stakes that are good for standard loamy soil, but also heavy-duty U-wire stakes. U-stakes have extra holding power because they have 2 ends that can both drive deeply into the soil. J-wire stakes typically have a longer, blunt end, suited for loamy raised beds, garden soil, or sandy soil. U-wire stakes are shorter, around 6 inches, but their dual prongs grip tightly in firmer soil. They also often feature sharp ends, making it easier for the 2 ends to penetrate compact soil. There are also stakes with a crimp in the middle to add extra hold for tough soil conditions. In rocky conditions, though, driving both prongs can be difficult and unreliable. If a wire stake doesn't push down in rocky soil, it might bend. To fix this, you can clip the ends off with wire cutters to make it shorter and easier to install. That's why for especially rocky conditions, we recommend going with J stakes and trimming them to a length that you can reliably insert them. You can do this with U-wire stakes too. It just will take twice as much cutting to get the job done. There are also plastic stakes that not only blend into the landscape better, but also have extra holding power in light or sandy soils. We've also found that because they flex slightly, these plastic stakes are easier to install in relatively rocky soil if you have a hammer or mallet handy. But in heavily rocky areas, they can crack just like wire stakes bend. They are also UV resistant, allowing them to endure prolonged exposure to sunlight. I'm going to cover 1/4 inch stakes next, but really quick, I want to discuss alternatives to tubing stakes and tips for installing your mainline if stakes prove too difficult to insert. If staking proves too difficult altogether, burying your polytubing 1 to 3 inches below the surface is a reliable alternative. Just keep in mind, it's harder to locate and repair later, and digging in rocky soil takes more work. And when burying, it can still be incredibly handy to use stakes to hold down the tubing as you're laying it down in a trench. There are other pros and cons to burying your polytubing that I address in a video linked in the top right and description below. Here's some expert advice I like to share with beginners installing polytubing. First, always remove your tubing from its packaging and let it sit in the sun for about an hour to soften it. This makes it much easier to work with. Second, you can connect the tubing to your water source, cap the end, and run water through it to weigh it down as you unroll. When you start cutting and adding fittings, stakes can still help keep everything securely in place. Third, keep in mind that once your main line is established, it can serve you for decades. Therefore, investing time to do it correctly from the start is worthwhile. After watching this video, you'll have the necessary information to do it properly. Okay, back to 1/4 inch stakes. For 1/4 inch tubing, we highly recommend using stakes sized specifically for 1/4 inch tubing, since the large tubing stakes will leave too much wiggle room. Since 1/4 inch microtubing stakes are under 6 inches in length and have only 1 prong, issues with inserting them are typically uncommon. If you do run into obstacles, the same rules apply to these as do the mainline stakes. Help other people find this video by hitting the like button. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. I like to read and reply to every question we get.